Hi, welcome to the Focused Brains channel. Today we are doing long questions of economics chapter Money and Credit. Stay tuned for more general questions of other chapters. For now, let's get started.
Question number 1. Why is modern currency accepted as a medium of exchange without any use of its own? And the answer is, it is accepted as a medium of exchange because the currency is authorized by the government of the country. In India, the Reserve Bank of India issues currency notes on the behalf of central government. As per Indian law, no other individual or organization is allowed to issue currency. The law legalizes the use of rupee as a medium of payment that cannot be refused in settling transactions in India. No individual in India can legally refuse a payment made in rupees, hence, the rupee is widely accepted as a medium of exchange. Question number 2. What do the banks do with the deposits which they accept from the public? Or list the loan activities of the banks in India. And the answer is, banks keep only a small proportion of the deposits as cash with themselves. Banks in these days hold about 15% of the deposits as cash in order to pay the depositors who might come to withdraw money from the bank on any given day. The bank is able to manage with this cash. Bank use a major portion of the deposits to extend loans. There is huge demand for loans for various economic activities. Banks mediate between those who have surplus funds, the depositors, and those who are in need of these funds, the borrowers. Banks charge a higher interest rates on loans than what it offers on deposits. The difference between what is charged from borrowers and what is paid to depositors is the main source of income of the bank. Question number 3. What are terms of credit? Explain. And the answer is, interest rate, collateral, and documentation requirement and the mode of repayment together comprise the terms of credit. Every loan agreement specifies an interest rate which the borrower must pay to the lender along with repayment of the principal. In addition, lender may demand collateral against loans, that is an asset that the borrower owns, such as land, building, vehicle deposits with banks, and uses this as a guarantee until the loan is repaid. If the borrower fails to repay the loan, the lender has a right to sell the collateral to obtain payment. The terms of credit vary substantially from one credit arrangement to another. It may vary depending on the nature of the lender and the borrower. Question number 4. Cheap and affordable credit is crucial for countries' development. And the answer is, cheap and affordable credit is crucial for countries' development because higher cost of borrowing means a larger part of the earnings of the borrower is used to repay the loan. This could lead to increasing debt and debt trap. Also, people who might wish to start an enterprise by borrowing may not do so because of the high cost of borrowing. Banks and cooperative societies need to lend more. This would lead to higher income, and many people could then borrow cheaply for a variety of needs. They could grow crops, do business, or set up small scale industries. They could set up new industries or trade in goods. Question number 5. Whether credit will be useful or not depends upon the situation. Give two different examples in support of this statement. Or describe two situations where credit plays a positive and vital role as well as negative role. And the answer is, credit plays a positive role. For example, Salim is a shoe manufacturer. During the festival season, he receives an order for 3,000 pair of shoes to be completed in a month. He employs two workers for pasting and stitching. He takes an advance payment from a large trader for 1,000 pair of shoes. He asks the leather supplier to supply leather and payment would be made later. Salim completes the order in a month, makes a good profit and repay all the money that he had borrowed. Credit plays a negative role. For example, Swapna, a small farmer, grows groundnut in her 3 acres of land. She took a loan from the moneylender for cultivation, hoping to repay the loan once the crop is harvested. Being hit by the pest, the crop fails. Expensive pesticides did not make any difference. Sapna is unable to repay the moneylender. Next year, she took a loan for cultivation. This year, it is a normal crop. Sapna earns little, but it is not enough to cover the old loans. She had to sell a part of the land to repay the loan. She is caught in a debt. Hence, we can say that it depends on situation whether credit will be useful or not. Question number 6. What are the two sources of credit in rural areas? Explain. And the answer is the two categories of sources of credit are formal sources of credit and informal sources of credit. The formal sources of credit are banks and cooperatives. These sources of credit are registered by the government and have to follow some rules and regulations. They charge low rate of interest. They keep a collateral from the borrowers for granting loans. Reserve Bank of India supervises the functioning of formal sources of credit. The informal sources of credit are moneylenders, relatives, friends, etc. These include those small and scattered units which are largely outside the control of government. They charge high rate of interest and the mode of repayment is very harsh. There is no need to keep a collateral in informal sources of credit. There is no organization to supervise the functioning of informal sources of credit. Question number 7. How are cooperatives functioning in the rural areas to solve the problem of credit? And the answer is besides banks, the other major source of cheap credit in rural areas are the cooperatives. Members of a cooperative pool their resources for cooperation in certain areas. For example, Krishak Cooperative has 2300 farmers as members. Cooperative accept deposits from its. With these deposits as collateral, the cooperative obtains a large loan from the bank. These funds are used to provide loans to members. Once these loans are repaid, another round of lending can take place. Question number 8. Describe the pattern of formal and informal sources of credit in urban areas. And the answer is the people in urban areas are divided into four categories: poor households, households with few assets, well off households, rich households. 85% of the poor households take loans from informal sources, whereas only 10% of rich households take loans from informal sources. 90% of the rich households take loans from the formal sources. 53% of the households with few sets take loans from informal sources of credit. 72% of the well-off households take loans from formal sector. In urban areas, poor households suffer. The rich households avail cheap credit, whereas poor households has to pay a large amount of borrowing. Most of the informal lenders charge a much higher interest on loans. As a result of it, larger part of the earnings of the borrower is used to repay the loan. Question number 9. What conclusion can you make after learning about the share of credit taken by rich or poor from informal and formal sources? Or why do we need to expand formal sources of credit in India? And the answer is firstly, the formal sector still meets only about half of the total credit needs of the rural people. The remaining credit needs are met from informal sources. Most loans from informal lenders carry a very high interest rate and do little to increase the income of the borrowers, but they get them into debt trap. Thus, it is necessary that banks and cooperatives increase their lending, particularly in the rural areas, so that the dependence on informal sources of credit reduces. If formal sector loans need to expand, it is also necessary that everyone receive these loans. At present, it is richer households who receive formal credit, whereas the poor have to depend on informal sources. It is important that the formal credit is distributed more equally so that the poor can benefit from the cheaper loans. Question number 10. The credit activities of the informal sector should be discouraged. Support this statement with arguments. Or why it is necessary for the banks and cooperative societies to increase their lending facilities in rural areas. Explain. And the answer is credit activities of informal sector should be discouraged because there is no organization to supervise the credit activities of the lenders in informal sector. The informal sector lends at a very high rate of interest and use unfair means to get the money back. Higher cost of borrowing means a large part of the earnings of the borrower is used to repay the loan. Hence, the borrowers have less income left for themselves. Sometimes, due to higher rate of interest, the amount to be repaid become higher than that the income of the borrower. Due to that, there is always a risk for borrowers to fall in debt trap. To save the people from the clutches and exploitation by the moneylenders, it is necessary for the banks and cooperatives to extend their lending activities in rural areas. It would lead to higher incomes and improve the condition of the poor. People can also start a business or set up a small scale industry.